Hello class, and welcome to the Week 9 Individual Lab Assignment. For this lab assignment, we'll complete in the Labs Lab 1, creating a pivot table report and pivot chart report. We'll be using page EX 536 through 538 in your e-textbook. We're completing steps 1 through 8. In order to complete this assignment, you'll need the student data files, which is Lab 8-1 Altar Holdings. You'll find this by clicking on Doc Sharing tab at the top of our class website, then select the Student Data Files link. As you scroll down, you'll then locate Lab 8-1 Altar Holdings. Download, save, and open this Excel file. When you open this Excel file, it will look like this. Next, we need to turn into our e-textbook on page EX 536. At the bottom of that page, you'll see here is in the Labs Lab 1, creating a pivot table report and pivot chart report. So the problem here is we're working for Altar Holdings and we're helping the financial director prepare and analyze the revenue and expense reports. So the financial directors asked you to prepare 2 pivot tables and corresponding pivot charts based on sales data. Well, let's look at the next page where we see an example of what we're actually going to be creating. Here in figure A, we see that we have pivot table fields that are selected, and we also have the second pivot table and pivot chart that we will be creating. Now, my version of what I'm walking through is going to look slightly different, but you'll be able to follow along on the general concepts, as this video is just a high-level overview. You still need to turn to your e-textbook, even if you're watching this video, and make sure you follow through on all the steps, as again, this video is just a high-level overview walking you through the general concepts. So in step number 2, using the data that's in the sales results worksheet, which I can see here, my tab name is sales results worksheet, I'm going to create a pivot table and a pivot chart. The same pivot table and chart that we saw in figure 92A. I'm going to have that on a separate sheet in my workbook, and ultimately I'll name my worksheet. To get started with the pivot table, I know I'm going to be on my sales results sheet here, and on my data tab, I'll locate my pivot table and create a manual table. I'm looking to use the information that is on this page, sales results. I'll select all of that, including I selected where the heading is in row 3, month, supplier, category, store, etc. I will be placing that in a new worksheet. I'll say OK. So on my new sheet, I do need to name that, and I am naming my sheet Sales by Supplier. So I will name this Sales by Supplier. As I go on to my next direction step, if necessary, add 2 blank rows. Well, I haven't finished creating my pivot table, because I need to create it so it's like figure 92A. Let's go back a page and see figure 92A. Here on this right side, I see the pivot table fields, and what is selected is supplier, store, and sales. So I'm going to select supplier, store, and sales. Then I can see that I have my data as store, supplier, and sales here. So I'm going to make sure that I have my data match the same. I have supplier here, sum of sales, and there's my store. I've moved up from values here. Your view may be a little different, but you just want to make sure that you have the same formatting as you see here in the figure of store, supplier, and the sum of sales. And then your pivot chart will adjust accordingly as we see. Back forward to our assignment directions, we then need to change the cell A4 and name that supplier. So A4, I'm going to simply name this supplier. and then I'm going to hit the enter return key on my keyboard, and in cell B3 we need to name that to store. So B3 I'll select, B3 I need to select here and name that store. And as we continue on, I'm going to apply a pivot style to the pivot table. In this example, I need to apply pivot style dark 21. When I select on my pivot table, I have a new tab in Excel, and I have a pivot table styles panel. Again, your ribbon may look a little different, but just take a moment now, pause the video, and locate that in your version of Excel. In pivot table styles, we have light, medium, and as I scroll down, I have dark. When I hover my cursor over any of these styles, I can see the name of that style. I'm looking for pivot style dark 21 and simply left click to select. It will now automatically apply that style to my pivot table. I then need to format the values as currency value with no decimal places. So I will select all of the range that has numerical data, and you remember this part. On the Home tab in the Numbers panel, we can select as currency. Also, on your ribbon, again, when you hover your cursor over any of the tooltips, you'll see the name, or any of your tools, the tooltips will display, and see more of a description or name for that tool. Here I need to decrease the number of decimal places. After the decimal, I have 2 zeros. I need to get rid of them. 1 click gets rid of 1, 2 clicks gets rid of 2. So I've just clicked on decrease the number of decimal places 2 times. Now I can continue on where I'm looking to apply the chart style 14. So essentially, again, as a high level overview, because you would have read your reading assignment, you will have your pivot table data here, and you'll simply go to charts and you'll be able to apply a chart type to your data here. And you're going to need to make sure here that you apply the style, and you want to resize the chart so it's in cells A18 through G35. So you need to make sure that's an A18, and I'll get my 2-way arrows here, and it needs to go to G35. So you do need to make sure that you have formatted your chart and it is in position correctly, as you see here. As we continue on, we're on step number 4 to create a second pivot table and associated pivot chart, as we see in figure 92B. And again, this will be in a separate sheet in the workbook, and we'll give it a worksheet name of Digital Product Sales by Month. When I go back a page, in figure B, this is now the pivot table and chart that I'm seeking to create. So I need to create my second pivot table, and I'm going to create it from here where I'm looking at this data range. Same as we just walked through. You should have this somewhat down by now. I've selected from B3 all the way over, and I'm going to look at my data tab and pivot table create manual. I've selected my range. It's a new worksheet. I'll say OK. Now my worksheet name is, again, it's Digital Product Sales by Month. So I'll name this Digital Product Sales by Month. Now I can continue along to step number 5 to change the contents of cell A to month and cell B3 to store. Well, before I can do that, I need to actually format and create my pivot chart. As I look back at the previous figure, I know that I am looking at selecting the range for month, category, store, and sales. So that's what I'm going to select. Now here for my values, I got to do a little shuffling here. And I'm looking at month. I think I went category, month. No, not sales. So sorry. Store and sales. Got it. Okay. So I've just formatted that, and you'll want to make sure that you take an opportunity and you have category, store, month, and sum of sales. And then your pivot chart will look like you see here. Let's go back over to our assignment directions. And again, this is just a high-level overview. I'm going to change A4 to month. So I'll select A4, and I'm going to name this month. Hit the enter return key on your keyboard. Oh, month already exists. Isn't that wonderful? So I just did A5, by the way, A5. And in cell B3, I'll change that to store, and in cell B3, so in my example, I'm just gonna change this to store. Alrighty then. Now we're moving along, and we just now need to apply a pivot style to the pivot table. We've already talked about that. So you'll look for pivot style dark. So when you select your pivot table, and on pivot table styles, again, you'll need to go down to dark, and you're looking, hover your cursor over the styles, pivot style dark 4, that formats that. You'll need to format the values as currency. Again, I'm just going through at a high level. You know how to format the values now and change the cells to currency. You're going to filter by category, and here we're going to filter by digital products and filter to the store OG Wholesale Club. So we have OG Wholesale Club. And so there's my pivot table filtered. And now I'm going to simply go into the last two steps of 7 and 8, which I'd kind of like to leave open for you to make sure you've done your reading in this for this week's reading assignment. And you're simply going to be applying a chart, a line chart, and a linear trend line. So essentially, I'm selecting this data as the range that I'm looking at. I'm going to select chart. I'm looking for a column chart, and that puts my column chart in here. And I haven't formatted my cells for currency, but you'll get the general idea here. I do have chart layout, and here's where I could add a trend line, and I'm going to do a linear forecast, and I'm looking to forecast out. Oops, a daisy. I'm looking to forecast out. And let me actually first get rid of my legend here. My trend line, linear forecast. And my linear forecast is out there for 3 months, and I put that in. And when I do select on my linear forecast and I select format trend line, in my dialog format, I can display R² value on chart and select OK, and that's what displays that. I want you to go through really carefully steps 7 and 8. And again, this is just information from the reading assignment, applying a chart style, and this is just a high-level overview. So I'm not doing the entire assignment for you, but you are making sure that you've read through the reading assignment, which will explain many of these concepts. And so here you'll see on EX477, read through adding a trend line chart. So you'll want to make sure that you understand and follow through on the reading assignment here for Chapter 8. I look forward to seeing your Week 9 lab assignments.